Welcome to day 4. If you're a poultry farmer, you know that there's lots of changes that happen between day 1 and day 4. So these are the newspapers I removed from the brooder this morning, where the others I usually burn them. Proper disposal is also important in poultry management. As you know, in the past I was using brooding paper, but there's some issues with the brooding paper. I've encountered lots of them. Some of them they were management. For example, like you have to clean the brooder paper like every day, and if you're keeping it, let's say I'm intending to keep these newspapers in the brooder for 7 days, and the brooder paper can't go up the 7th day, because if it does, that means your birds are going to get coccidiosis because the droppings will have accumulated on them. And then cleaning alone isn't enough, and I personally, it was quite difficult for me to clean every day. And the other thing, actually the brooder papers come at a cost. You need to buy them. Like for me, I didn't have to buy the newspapers. These are newspapers, a friend gave them to me at a free cost. I just had to incur just transport charges to my place. You have to find ways of cutting on cost from day 1 when you're doing poultry farming. These newspapers, I've used them now, this is the 4th day. They also have challenges. For example, the first day and the second day, I thought my chickens were eating. Little did I know. I knew that the feed was hiding under those newspapers. The food tends to hide, you see? Tends to hide under the newspapers. And I had to think outside the box how I can solve that challenge. I realized there is the brooding plates or the feeding plates for the chicks, but I didn't have the money, Like I said, you have to cut on the cost from day 1. So I was like, how can I get the feeding trays at 0 cost as well? That's when it clicked in on my mind that I have trays in my kitchen cabins. We are Muslims and we enjoy trays a lot. What's the difference between these trays and the other feeding trays on the market? I got the feeds and I put here, and my birds, many of them flocked on these trays. I was like, oh, impressive. But the challenge was, as you can see, the surface, it's slippery. They were not stable. They couldn't stand well, scratch well into the feeds. Now that's a challenge. How do I improve on the friction on these trays? That's when I remember that I still have my newspapers. Like, how can I use these newspapers to improve friction? So I got the newspapers. It sits well, right? But it's going to go off once the birds are there. So what did I do? When we were young, there are things you used to do out of play. Then I remembered that actually if you put water on a surface and you put the paper, it sticks. So I put some water, and actually the newspaper sat. You see? It's stable. And then, of course, I have to add another one because there is this space left here. But you have to make sure the water is actually clean. It doesn't have to be contaminated water. So everything has sat so well. All I have to do is to tear off some parts that are not sitting well. So you cut off these ones nicely, you cut off these edges. Thing is, if you can afford the feeding trays, go ahead and use the feeding trays. But if you're looking at cutting down on costs, use the materials that are locally available to you. Some of these trays, for example, you're just going to use them for a few days. And especially if your farm is not so big, you don't really have to spend a lot. I also improvised on these bases. I told you I was using these in the previous video, I mentioned it. But these ones have holes, but I needed to use them, not spending any single penny on feeding trays. So what I had still, I'm using the same newspapers. All I can say, introducing newspapers on my farm has been super cost effective. So all I have to do is to block these holes, and I have the time. Guys, I'm doing this. So this one is blocked as well. I can put food comfortably and it doesn't pour. Isn't this impressive? Okay. We don't put much. It has to be a sizable amount. Okay, so let's go see how they love this. As you can see, they're loving it. And the thing is, it takes lots of them at once. There are about I can't even count them, maybe 20 at the same time. You see how they are growing so fast. The fluffy feathers are showing now. So be as innovative as you can, especially in terms of saving costs at your farm. And as for this, you can see the food doesn't pour. So if you're planning to visit me, I will not have to use serving trays because I don't have so many of them at my home. I have to go some 7 days without using these serving trays in my house. Now we are trying to cut down on the cost. So as we conclude our video, the question remains, will these newspapers be available to us farmers for a very long time? Given the fact that lately people prefer consuming online content rather than the printed publications. So that's for you and I to ponder about.